Recently, South Africa has been in the news, and this time, it's because of US President Donald Trump meddling in its affairs. Trump announced that the US would suspend aid to South Africa due to its newly approved land reform policies. In a surprising turn of events, Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traore introduced a similar land reform law just days after Trump's announcement. According to reports, Traore declared that all land within Burkina Faso now belongs to the government. While some critics call this move dictatorial, the authorities in Burkina Faso insist that this reform has a purpose. But what exactly is the reason behind this drastic change? And how will it impact farmers, businesses, and foreign investments in Burkina Faso? Let's find out. On February 5, the Burkinabe Council of Ministers approved a bill that completely reshapes land ownership in Burkina Faso. During a meeting attended by President Traore, the country's economic minister, Abubakar Nakonabo, made the bill official, stating, "This legal text now enshrines the objective of the state. The goal is to optimize land management and strengthen the central role of public authorities in this strategic sector. In simple terms, the government has taken ownership of all land in the country. For decades, land ownership in Burkina Faso was based on customary rights where communities controlled and allocated land according to traditional norms. Under this system, land belonged to local communities, it was passed down through generations and families had security over their land. However, this system had major challenges: frequent land disputes, lack of clear documentation, and exploitation by powerful elites. With the new reform, all land is now state-controlled, meaning the government can regulate land use and development more efficiently. Why did President Traore introduce this law? Some people believe this is just a power grab by Traore's government, but the truth is, this is a strategic move. By taking control of land, the government can issue long-term leases, 18 to 99 years, for farming and development, prevent land grabbing by foreign investors, and strengthen the country's economic sovereignty. Land grabbing has been a growing issue in Africa. Foreign companies and multinational corporations buy up vast amounts of land, taking away resources from local farmers. For example, a Gulf-based company called Blue Carbon acquired 25 million hectares of land across 5 African countries. This land deal covers 10% of Liberia and 20% of Zimbabwe. Many of these land purchases are used for growing crops for export, carbon offset schemes, and expanding mining and industrial projects. Traore's new law effectively blocks foreign entities from acquiring land, ensuring that Burkina Faso's resources remain in the hands of its people. So, what does this mean for the people of Burkina Faso? For farmers, more access to land for agriculture and food security, reduction in land conflicts, and government-backed support for large-scale farming. For industrialization, the government can develop roads, factories, and infrastructure faster and no delays caused by private land disputes. For stability, the law prevents foreign corporations from dominating land ownership. Better regulation of land use ensures sustainable development. This reform allows the state to plan large-scale projects that benefit the population rather than leaving land underutilized or exploited by outside interests. How does this compare to South Africa's land reform? Burkina Faso's land reform is different from South Africa's in some key ways. South Africa's land reform is historically driven. It aims to correct injustices from apartheid. Historical background. In 1913, the British colonial government restricted black South Africans from owning land. White settlers, who made up just 4.5% of the population, controlled over 50% of the best land. Black South Africans were forced into homelands with poor soil. South Africa's new land reform law allows the government to reclaim land for public use. However, it explicitly states that land cannot be taken arbitrarily and compensation will be provided where required. This is different from Burkina Faso, where the government automatically takes ownership of all land but allows long-term leases for its use. The Zimbabwe example is a warning or a lesson. Many critics argue that Zimbabwe's land reform was a disaster, and some believe South Africa should learn from its mistakes. But is the Zimbabwe case really what the media portrays? Historical background. Under British rule, Africans were banned from owning land. The Land Apportionment Act of 1930 gave 51% of the land to white settlers, while 1 million black Africans had to share just 20 million acres. After independence, Britain promised to fund land redistribution but failed to deliver. In 1997, the British government refused to continue funding land reforms, leading Zimbabwe to seize white-owned farms forcibly. The consequences. The US and EU imposed economic sanctions on Zimbabwe. Sanctions blocked trade, cut access to credit, and froze Zimbabwe's assets. This led to hyperinflation, economic collapse, and food shortages. Western media often blames Zimbabwe's land reform for the economic crisis, but in reality, the sanctions played a major role. To this day, Zimbabwe struggles under these sanctions, and the US has even made compensating white farmers a requirement for lifting them. What does this mean for Africa's future? The issue of land reform in Africa is not simple. Western governments are quick to criticize African nations when land is taken from white settlers, but they ignore the centuries of suffering black Africans endured under colonial rule. President Traore has now set a precedent for African leaders. Ignore Western pressure and do what's best for your country. Ensure land remains in the hands of local people. Promote economic independence rather than foreign exploitation. But will other African nations follow Burkina Faso's lead? And what impact will this have on foreign relations? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with others, subscribe for more updates on African affairs.